I'm with Oliver Walker-Jones, who's the head of marketing at Joby Aviation and a speaker at the Smart Mobility Conference here at Hypermotion Dubai. Oliver was part of a panel discussion discussing how deliverable is urban air mobility. Oliver, thanks for being with us.
It's a pleasure.
Let's just start off first of all. Tell us about a little bit about Joby Aviation. You've been in the market for 10 years, but I'll leave it over to you. Tell us about it.
So Joby was founded more than 10 years ago by our CEO, Joby. He's a serial entrepreneur. He actually made the GorillaPod camera stand once upon a time, but now he's kind of always had this burning idea that electric could change the way that we fly. So until now, we haven't really had electric flight. We see a great potential to take passengers and fly them over cities, across regions in an aircraft that's entirely electric. So it takes off vertically, transitions to forward flight. It has a wing, so kind of starts a bit like a helicopter, kind of turns into an aircraft in kind of traditional winged aircraft, and then lands vertically again. The brilliant thing about electric is not only it's emissions free, but it allows you to make an aircraft that is very quiet as well. So we're hoping that it's going to be able to go right into city centers and make a real difference to the way that people travel.
And of course, what's the capacity of people?
So we have 4 passengers and a pilot up front.
Now, it's in your interest, being Joby Aviation, for urban air mobility to become a reality.
Yeah.
But just how realistic is that objective?
So there are a bunch of different things you need to make this market a reality. The first is the vehicle, and we're making really good progress there. So we have an aircraft, it flies. We've flown it more than 1,000 times. You can go check it out on YouTube. It's a real thing. Then you need regulatory allowance to actually go fly your aircraft, and we're making good progress there. So we work with the FAA in America, that's the aviation regulator, and we're making good progress in terms of getting the certification that we might need to actually go and fly. And so, it's looking very realistic that 2024 is a date that we'll be able to operate. There are a few other instrumental parts to this. So you need infrastructure. So landing ports, well, you can use existing heliports already, and we have time available to go find other places that we might want to land, for example, on top of shopping centers or parking structures. And then the final piece of the puzzle is just making sure the public are ready and willing to come and get on it. So we have a partnership with Uber that allows us to work with them to identify where the best routes might be to introduce the service, but also to make sure that we have a way to kind of get those customers through the Uber app to come take a flight with us.
One of your key missions of this course is to be affordable.
Yeah.
You want anyone to be able to afford to fly a Joby aviation plane. How are you going to achieve that?
So electric propulsion allows you to bring a price point down to something that is surprisingly affordable. So a helicopter, I don't know about you, I don't fly in a helicopter every day of the week, it's expensive. But it's expensive because the fuel's expensive, because the maintenance is expensive, and because you can only really use it at certain times in certain places. So if we can make this something that accesses downtown, where you can scale it up, where you're using electric rather than jet fuel, where you have the opportunity to fly many more missions in a day, actually you can bring that price point down. And so what we intend to get to is by 2026, so once we kind of scaled up a bit, $3 per passenger mile. So
you get the economy of scale over time.
Yeah, and that's actually, that's not so far off what you'd expect to see from, an Uber Black today if you're traveling around. Today, that's kind of, it's not unreasonable that people might pay to travel in that form of transport. Now, over time, we want that to really change, and we want to bring that price point even further down, so it becomes something that's almost universally accessible.
What are the key elements then? I mean, obviously you mentioned regulatory policies and so on. Is that the sort of key element to get urban air mobility off the ground, so to speak?
So you need an aircraft that functions and is certified. So you need a regulatory body to say this aircraft is safe enough to take passengers. That's kind of step one. Then you need the certification to actually fly it through the air, or like to act as an airline. And then you need the infrastructure to be able to land. So all of those pieces are coming together, and we're confident by 2024 we'll have those together so that we can start the service.
Yeah, and I guess what about congestion? Because at the moment you look around the urban airspace in Dubai, for example, and, okay, there's nothing really, is there? I mean, and let's say eventually maybe 10, 20 years down the track, I mean, if it's going to be like ground mobility, it's going to be drones or whatever, airplanes flying across. How do you manage that space? So
the first thing to conceptualize is a road gets a traffic jam and a train line gets busy as well, but they both work in 2 dimensions. So the great thing about the air is you can move in 3 dimensions. So already you've got a lot more space to work with. And then if you consider the speed at which they move and the fact that they're spending some of their time on the ground, actually the reality is even if you spread 1,000 aircraft over a city like Dubai, you're not going to see two of them in the same place pretty often, right? Because they're going to be pinging across the sky, they're going to be landing, they're going to be over here. And what we really like to see is not that they kind of go just from A to B, but actually that we have 10 or 20 or 30 vertiports spread across the city. And so you won't see the traffic jams in the air that I think you maybe kind of imagine when you think of the Jetsons.
All right. So you're not going to tell us about your first commercial project. It could be in the USA, it could be somewhere else. There's obviously, of course, the potential in here in the UAE. We have Dubai, Abu Dhabi, which is a very popular route, very busy route. Tens of thousands of people are traveling that route every day. We did our math very, very quickly. So Dubai to Abu Dhabi is 140 kilometers. Typically, it takes 1.5 hours in a car. If your planes are flying at 321 kilometers an hour, less than 30 minutes. That's a pretty handy proposition.
Yeah, so we see great potential in a whole bunch of cities around the world, but that example is a really good one where there's already kind of really good bi-directional flow, so people traveling between those two places, there's a clear demand, and we're able to service it considerably quicker than the ground alternative. And of course, it's not just quicker, but it's also emissions free. So we feel like it's a really good example of what we could do and how we could change things. And the great thing is, like, it doesn't have to be, downtown one city to downtown another city. Of course, if you happen to live in the suburbs, or if you happen to be traveling to the conference center that's outside the city center, we can get you there as well. And so that's really where this starts to make a lot of sense.
So perhaps the next edition of not the next edition of Hypermotion Dubai, but one Hypermotion Dubai, we might be taking taxis from visitors to the airport to Hypermotion Dubai with our Joby Aviation plane. And of course, sustainability is a key part of it, isn't it? Because it is, of course, electrically propelled. And everything these days when it comes to mobility, future mobility, needs to be environmentally friendly.
Yeah, so we think it's really important that we have a solution which is environmentally friendly, so zero operating emissions when the aircraft's flying through the air, it's fully electric. And we're talking about journeys of 5 to 150 miles, but that's just the start, right? If we can prove that electric technology works for flight, there's no reason why over time that can't extend. So you could look at longer flights, and also the future of hydrogen as another fuel source. If we can start to use and bring in those new technologies and understand how to make the most of them, there's no reason why you can't fast forward 30, 40, 50 years and have all flight globally emissions free. And if we can do that, that's going to have a really big impact on the health of the planet.
You're targeting people at the moment. You want to move people around at the first point. So what about goods and healthcare, pharmaceuticals, essential products, foods, delivery? Is that also in the pipeline, perhaps?
So we're focused entirely on delivering a passenger vehicle to start with, of course, because it's where we see the biggest opportunity to help people. It's where we see the biggest opportunity to decarbonize, and also it's one of the harder things to do. Transporting goods, fine, but transporting people, you have to know the technology you developed is as good as it possibly can be. So that's where we're focused. No reason why electric propulsion can't be applied to goods and other services as well. And I think if you start to look a little further afield to things like humanitarian needs as well, great opportunity to bring something in that if it takes off vertically, you don't need a runway, right? So you can just drop that into wherever you need it, whenever you need it, and we're hopeful that the future we can extend beyond the passengers that we're looking at today.
So we're looking at 2024 again for your first commercial flights with, of course, a pilot. Is there a level of autonomy that we can expect in the future?
Yeah, so it's worth saying the aircraft is actually, it builds in a lot of autonomous systems already. So, it has 6 propellers around the aircraft. So the pilot already doesn't have 6 little levers that he or she is pushing and pulling. So already there's autonomy in there that helps the pilot fly the aircraft. And that will only increase. So over time, we'd expect, if you fast forward a decade maybe, you could expect autonomous flight to be something you see on a pretty regular basis. There's a regulatory hurdle we have to cross, there's technological hurdle, and of course there is just the factor of would your mum get in an aircraft without a pilot?
Are we ready to get into an unmanned? Sort of the vehicles is one thing, and then of course planes is another thing altogether, isn't it?
I think so, and there's a lot of public acceptance around this that we have to build, and we're kind of really realistic about how much of a challenge that could be. So we not only need to persuade the people who want to get in this aircraft that it's a good thing, but we also need to persuade the communities that live in and around it. So even if you're never going to fly with us, you still have to think that it's a good idea and it's safe and it's quiet if we're going to be allowed to operate it in your city or your district. And so there's a lot of education that needs to be done over the next few years of demonstrating what this looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like, that it's safe, that it's quiet, that you shouldn't need to worry about it if it's flying over your head.
Oliver, it's been great to have you with us. For just your final thoughts of being here at Hypermotion Dubai, inaugural show. How does it feel being here? How does it feel to be connecting with your peers? Pioneers of the urban mobility space.
So we're really excited to be here and be part of it. I think it's great to see so many different companies coming together. In the last kind of 6 months or so, there's been a really big maturity leap in the industry that we work in terms of electric flight. There's a lot more companies out there. Our aircraft, for example, is now flying. We're able to show people and demonstrate this in a real environment. And so being around a whole bunch of people that are able to have the conversation about what comes next is exciting. Being next to the World Expo is even kind of doubly exciting because we're talking about the future of everything here, and if we can be part of that conversation, that's really exciting. Really just looking forward to when we come to one of these conferences and we're actually flying the aircraft. That's going to be the big difference.
That's the next step, and actually seeing your planes here in Dubai.
Yeah.
Oliver, great to have you with us. Thanks for being here.
Pleasure.